What's happening there today, everybody? Brandon here again at the studio. Still dealing with my massive stack of small canvases here, turning out some painting tutorials. So I got another one here for you today in this video of a blue heron, aka the Freak, as he's known around here because of his fishing skills. But anyway, if you want to have a look at this painting tutorial of a blue heron, paint along with me. Let's get to it. Alright, so we're going to get started here on another bird painting. I'm going to be doing a blue heron this time. These are pretty popular in all the waterways around here that I fish on. I see a lot of them, and they're also a pretty popular bird along our coast here in South Carolina. So we're going to do this blue heron. I'm working on a 6x8 canvas here is what I've got. And I'm going to start with a 3/4 inch wash brush, but any brush that you've got that will cover some background for you will work as well. And I'm going to start with putting in a scene here in the background that's just basically a little bit of an out of focus distant tree line with some water back there coming in that this heron will be standing in pretty shallow here in the foreground. So we're going to be working with some greens and blacks and browns and stuff to get that done. And to create our background, I'm not really looking for any specific things back there going on. Just kind of create something that's going to be a darker background. So this is going to be black with a little bit of sap green mixed in and a touch of titanium white to start out with, and I'm just going to come in here and start create some shapes back in the distance and just vary that up until we get some good coverage back here. And ultimately, again, I'm just kind of giving myself a dark background to work with that is going to be a little off in the distance, so I'm trying to keep my saturations down a little bit here, graying things out with the white and the black. And up at the very top we might create a few brighter shades of some green up there towards the top of the canvas here, because this is going to be maybe the area that's the tree line that's catching some sun back there. Wherever you decide you want your water to start, instead of up here, you'll notice I'm doing my brush, turning it, twisting it, creating all kinds of textures. Where I want my water to start, though, all of my brush strokes are going to be horizontal. They're going to be nice and flat, left to right motions. You can still vary your colors up and mix different things in there, but I don't want all these crazy looking brush stroke textures down here where my water is. I don't want to lose. I do have a pencil sketch of my pelican. I did pelican last time. Now I do have a pencil sketch of my heron in there that I don't want to completely lose where I've got his legs. So I'm going to come in with a smaller brush in black right here and just quickly drop in where his legs are. So this will give you an idea now of the zones that I'm working with. A little bit of a top zone is going to be the tree line, and then some background stuff here, and then water coming along in the bottom. And it's ultimately all going to be done in the same colors. Browns, greens, blacks is what I'm going with now. Obviously you have the abilities to put in any colors you want, do whatever kind of background you want. I put in just a touch of blue in with that on that particular pass, if you can see that. Just something to mix it up back there. And then I come back in here in this mid-ground with a little bit of brown in there that I didn't have before. Alright, that's got us a pretty good starting point here in terms of our background. I'm going to give that a few minutes to dry, and then we're going to come back in and add a few more things going on back there just to define it out a little bit, make it a little bit more interesting. Alright, so I want to do a couple of things with my background here. I want to create a little bit of a separation between what's going to be the tree line back there and then the beginning of the water. And so one of the ways we did that obviously is, again, creating our horizontal brush strokes, and down here what's going to be water, and keeping everything really splotchy up in the back that's going to be the tree line. But I'm going to do a couple of other things. I'm going to darken up the base of that tree line back there. So I'm going to go back into some green, some sap green, go into some raw umber, and a little bit of black as well. And we're going to come along the base of our, essentially where our tree line is back there, and we're going to add a little bit of a dark kind of shadowed line area, and we're just going to kind of drop some dark in there right now and then kind of come back and work around that a little bit. But that's essentially going to be like right at the edge of our water. I also want to darken up the water as well back there, so I'm going to bring that down a little bit into where my water line is, touch in some textures of things coming back down over that black in a few places to break it up a little bit. Now coming down from the top here where we have some areas that more sun is hitting, I'm going to go into some yellow now and bring that into that mix and randomly hit a couple of places with that yellow coming down. And you can vary this up a little bit, a little more yellow in some passes, a little less yellow, whatever you want to do. Just going to say that there's some stuff back there that's catching a little more sunlight than some others. Alright, now at our water line, I'm going to go into a little bit of that yellow ochre and a little bit of white. And for the heck of it, let's just put a little bit more of that green in as well. But I'm going for a fairly light color here. Some kind of separation back there. Now while I've got that color on the brush, let's just come up in here and break some of this up a little bit with it. We're going to do some different things in this water area anyway. Let's go into some brown. Add a little bit of raw umber here to this mix. Come in here in our foreground in our water and drop in a few brown things right here at the bottom of the canvas where they would be closer to us. And heck, let's add a little bit of black to that mix now, darken things up even more. A little bit of black in there. Let's drop in some dark stuff right here close as well. Not doing anything specific here. I'm literally just brushing some different colors in here. Add just a little bit more white to that mix that we were just using there. A little bit more white, maybe a little bit more brown. Work that back just a little bit more. Keeping our brush strokes horizontal through here again. We are dealing with water. Relatively shallow water there though, so whatever this is, we're kind of seeing the bottom of whatever this heron is standing in. I'm going to take a small brush, doesn't really matter what it is, something kind of tiny. Put the indication of some kind of reeds or tree branches or something else going along back there. So I'm going to go into yellow ochre and some brown, some raw umber here, a little bit of titanium white. And let's say that there is something going on right back in there along our edge. Just light brush strokes of touching in some lines back there. We don't know what that is. Could be sticks or tree branches or reeds or who knows. Now I'm going to add more yellow ochre to that mix to yellow things up slightly. And just to be crazy, let's add maybe a hint of red into that same mix to kind of brown things out a little bit with some red to it. Maybe there's add a little bit of that color to my reflection down here in my water. Maybe do the same thing with my little reed looking things. Something like that. Now I want to take my small brush here and I'm going to thin out some white, so I'm going to kind of create a little bit of a glaze of white and really thin it down and hit a couple of places across this water with that. I'm just trying to create the illusion that there's a little bit of a sheen across the water in a few places here with a really thin white kind of glaze across some of it. Something about like that. And now up here in the foreground, I'm going to take a liner brush, create a few little sharp, distinct lines here. I'm going to go into black and just a hint of raw umber in it, maybe a little bit of red. Drop a couple of real kind of sharp lines in terms of something dark. Some kind of shadows of something along the ground down there. We're just trying to give the appearance, though, that this is water that's a lot closer to the viewer here, and we can make out some kind of shapes, shadows, and images of something along the bottom down here, but it is through water, so we can't tell exactly what it is. And maybe we'll stick a couple of reeds coming right here in the foreground. We'll keep that yellow ochre on here and draw a couple of things coming right off of the canvas. Maybe these are the tops of some kind of marsh grasses right in here. And that just kind of pushes everything else back behind it then when we do that, so that's pretty good. Maybe I'll even drop a couple of green ones in there with it. Let's go into some green. Touch of yellow with it maybe. Alright, I think that's got pretty much done everything that I want to do, with the exception of maybe I do want to sharpen up my water line back there just a tad bit more, although it is off in the distance. We're going to sharpen it up a little bit. I'm just going to go into a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow ochre. And I think I want to darken up that area below that a little bit to kind of reflect my darker shoreline. So right below where I just sharpened up that edge, let's kind of reflect that, this dark area in here. We're going to reflect that down in the water. So basically on both sides of that water line, I'll darken the top of it with the same value that I'm darkening below it, just so they match up pretty good. Alright, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Now all we got to do is deal with detailing out our main attraction here, which is this blue heron. I'm going to start with a little 1/2 inch angled brush. And the first thing I think I'm going to do is just kind of re-establish the legs down there. I'm going to go into some straight up yellow ochre, maybe a hint of brown with it, but mostly straight up yellow ochre. And then mostly black, a little bit of red, touch of white maybe to establish the bottom parts of his legs. Now we'll come back and detail those out a little bit later. I just wanted to kind of re-establish where they were. Now I'm going to block in my heron here, like I do with most of my birds, with the darkest colored stuff in the areas that they belong in. Most of this bird is kind of a really pale bluish gray color, but I want to go into a little darker values of all that to start with. I'm going to go into some phthalo blue and some black. And then I'm going to add a little titanium white to that mix. Let's see what kind of color I've got here. I'm going to start down here on the bottom end. He's the darkest. Down here at the bottom end of his tail. That's not bad, I guess, to start with. Now I'm going to add a little more white to that mix as I start to move up the back a little bit. He's got some rather dark blue right in this area. And then he's got a streak of pretty dark blue on the back of that head, or above his eye, I should say. Maybe in a couple of places around these legs, there's some dark blue in there. And actually right in there, if you were following me very closely, I actually didn't intend on doing that. I need to cover that back up with green and black. And he just has feathers that kind of poke down above that area right there, but he's not a solid mass right in there, so I need to make that back out to my background color essentially. Mostly black and green right in there. That's a pretty good fix. Now I think I need to maybe drop to a slightly smaller brush. Well, let's just finish up his head there first. His neck and head area. Now I need to switch back to a much smaller brush to kind of finish blocking that in. Something you can get into some tighter spaces with here. Finish rounding out his head and neck there. Now that bill's got some yellow there on it. I'm going to come in with yellow ochre to give myself that indication here towards the end. We'll come back in and touch that up later, but I just want to put that into play there, that I know that that's what's going on. And he's a little darker along the top. Kind of headed back to where his eye is back there. And for now, we'll just put a little dot of black where that eyeball is. Knowing what we're going to be dealing with, I'm going to go ahead and put a few of these feather indications hanging off the front end, and all it really is a really light gray value hanging off. I'm going to go into the blue that we've been blocking in with here, blue, black, gray combination, thin it down with a little bit of white in the mix, and just draw in a few indications right here that we're going to be dragging some feathers off that belly, just so in my mind I can visualize this a little bit better as I'm going along. I'm going to start detailing out here with a little small 1/8 angle brush, and the first thing I'm going to do is come into a little bit of raw umber and some red and just a little bit of yellow ochre and titanium white, kind of create this brownish, orangish looking whatever, because there's a couple of random things up here where his legs come in that are sort of that color, and I'm just going to put a little of that in. Now I'm going to start, I guess, with this big wing here, and we need to create a bit of a gray, so you can use some black, some white, whatever, tiny bit of blue in the mix as well. And I'm going to come along in here and try to define out essentially the front edge of this largest wing that's coming down. And I'm also going to take that color, add a little bit more white to that mix. Go along the top edge of the back there. And we'll come along in here and lighten up a little bit of this further down. Alright, now let me switch to a liner brush, and we're going to draw in some of these feathers coming down here. They're laying across that back of that wing. So we're going to need to thin this paint down here, get it a good ink-like consistency, and start to draw in some individual feathers that are hanging down from the back. And ultimately this whole back is going to end up being that particular color I'm dragging down, so it's okay to cover all that up. But what we're trying to achieve is bring that color about halfway down that wing with some individual feathers that are coming down. Something to that effect. Now I'm going to darken that up a little bit with some gray. Some black, some white added to that mix a little bit, I guess. And then come down here and define out some of these wings that are along this edge. I need to gray that out even more as it's going further down the wing there. Put a few highlights on the back end of the tail. And break up some of this stuff here around the tops of these legs. That's a pretty good starting point, I think, for that wing. I drop back over to my little angle brush. Add a little bit more white to that mix to brighten things up a little bit more, to highlight the top of this back out a little bit brighter. Now back to the liner brush to do some detail working around that head. Let's go into that blue and black there, that dark blue black mix, and get that back where we want it here on the kind of top of the head here. Maybe there's a couple of random dark things right there on the top of that neck. And let's see, we need to get our highlight, our whiter color here, and drop it down. Brighten things up right below the bill a little bit. Right along the tip of the beak. That top leading edge a little bit there. I think I want to add some blue to that. Or it's not quite so white right there on the top. Yeah, that eyeball in there. Not much you can see from this distance, but we do want to touch just a tiny bit of kind of yellow in the center of it if we can. I'm going to use yellow ochre with a little bit of white. Probably can't even make that out on camera, but there's a little bit of yellow in there. While we're dealing with this yellow ochre and white, let's touch up this bottom part of the bill a little bit that I got going on. Okay. Let's fix these feet with this color too, this yellow ochre and white. Let's give a little bit of, or these legs I should say, a little bit of highlight to the front end of that leg. Front end of this leg. And then let's go into a little brown into that mix. Now even more brown to darken up some of that in the middle. I'll add a little bit of highlight stuff going on around what is like his knee joint there. And then carry it into mostly nothing but raw umber and black there to finish out parts of his legs we can see right there. Okay. That's really all about what we have to do for this particular project. Of course, you can keep working on minute details if you want to detail that out as much as you're happy with. But that's a pretty good finished product for me right now at this point. So until next time, happy painting, everybody.